Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Function Stats and Trigonometry, Day 1. FST stands for Function, Statistics, and Trigonometry. Where we're starting at in Chapter 1 is some statistics. So what I need you to do today is I need you to have in front of you a Day 1 class that says Lesson Master 1-1. I also need you to have the homework sheet that says FST Homework 1.1. I usually have them labeled as Day 1 class and then 1.1 or Day 1 homework. Now, this video is going to jump back and forth today. If you was in class and the teacher's there and everything, what we would do is on the vocabulary, we would talk about it, record it. I'm going to try to speed that process up here in the video. So we're going to jump back and forth on those sheets today. So if you would come over to that definition sheet that starts off with vocabulary, I'm going to talk about each of these, and then as you do, record them. Now I'm going to throw this out. Whoever the sub is, you may have to hit pause on the video. If you're watching it from yourself, you can hit pause. If you think I get going too fast, cheat a little bit, take a picture of the screen, and then record that back over, and then you'll have everything. So statistics, it has two meanings. It's a science of collection, organization, and analysis and interpretation of data. Or it also refers to a number used to describe a set of numbers. We do this so often in life. The average score was. The football team is averaging so many yards per game. The median house price in Hayes, America is. I always tell people, if I was not here teaching you math, my dream job, I would love to be a statistician for a baseball team. If you really think about that, you'd get to travel, you'd get to see some beautiful baseball stadiums. And then if you ever really sit down and listen to a baseball game, they have stats for everything. They have a stat for playing in the morning, playing at night, playing in the afternoon, batting from the left side of the plate, the right side of the plate, temperature over 100 degrees. They just have a stat for everything. And I think that's so cool. Now, data is the plural of datum. Datum is just a single piece of information. Usually you hear the word data because you're given more than one piece of information. Now, variable is one you're going to hear me talk about a lot today. A variable is a characteristic of a person or thing that can be classified, counted, ordered, or measured. You're going to hear me say that 3 or 4 times today. It's called variable, sometimes variable of interest. Why are we doing this? What are we trying to get out of this? Can we classify it? Can we categorize it? So, once again, pause the video if you need. Get those written down. Take a picture of it, whatever you need to do. Now, moving on with the definitions. Population. The subjects of a particular subject. The larger group that you're drawing a conclusion about. I will show you on my next slide a very simple survey. And out of that very simple survey, I'm going to ask you to pick out the big group that I'm drawing a conclusion about. And then I'm also going to ask you to pick me out the smaller group. So, population is the big group that I'm going to draw a conclusion about. The sample is a subset of that population. So it's a smaller group. A survey, by definition, is simply this: gathering of facts or opinions through an interview or a questionnaire. If I had $1 for every time you have been involved in a survey, I would be a billionaire probably. Because if you ever think about even how often we do this, you guys fill out surveys at Hayes High School, but how many times has your coach said, hey, where would you like to go eat? How many times have you and your friends be sitting around like, what do you guys want to do tonight? See a movie, go out and eat? Those are just little surveys where you're gathering opinions. A census is a survey of the entire population of the United States. Now, our census claims that it gets 100% participation. I always disagree with that. They get a high percent, but I always claim they leave off the homeless. They leave off some immigrants. So, But the census is supposed to be a 100% population. And a representative sample is simply a sample that has the same characteristics as the population. Now, here in a second, I'll get away from some of these definitions, and I'll give you a simple survey, and we'll see if we can pick out the population, the variable, and the sample. So once again, pause the video, get those jotted down, or take a picture of that, and then get them transferred over later if you would, because they'll show up again next class. Now, this you do not have a sheet to or anything, but here goes my easy example. Let's identify the population, sample, and variable in this simple survey. Let's assume that lunch today is breakfast pizza. It was always my daughter's favorite, so I figured I'd pick breakfast pizza. I wonder if the students at Hays High School feel that this is a good lunch. So I asked my M2 FST class if they like breakfast pizza. Well, this is called a survey. I'm trying to figure out some information. It has a variable in there, it has a sample, and it has a population. The variable is, why are you doing the survey? What is it that we can count or classify? Well, in this case, I'm trying to figure out, does Hays High School Guys, sorry about the little catch there. My computer must have figured out school starts tomorrow, so it just froze up. So here goes again. The variable, or the variable of interest, is simply this. I'm trying to figure out, do the students at Hays High School like breakfast pizza? That's why I'm doing the survey. That variable can be classified or answered. Now the sample is a smaller group that I talk to. Well, the smaller group that I'm talking to is my M2 FST class. I did not talk to every student at Hays High School. That would take too long. But I talked to my M2 FST class. Now the population is the bigger group that I'm trying to draw a conclusion about. That bigger group in this case would be Hays High School students. So there's a quick, easy example of a variable, a sample, and a population. Now, if you would, come over to Lesson Master 1-1. We'll try to get you rolling on here. Notice there's a chart of information. Now, you really got to be careful when you give them a chart of information because there's a lot of things hiding here. Let's read through what this chart talks about. It says, in Boston, 2,145 selected inline skaters were chosen for a survey and asked to clarify their ability as beginner, average, or advanced. They were also asked whether they wore protective gear like helmets, knee pads, shin pads, and elbow pads when skating. The data were organized in a table shown below. Now, looks pretty simple, but let me start throwing some things out at you. Whenever I look at this information first, I need to decide, is it based on the sample or the entire population? So come back to this in Boston, 2,145 people. Now ask yourself this, did they interview everybody in Boston, or did they just go out and find a sample of people that live in Boston that also happen to skate? In this case, all of this data is based on a sample. There's no way they talked to everybody in Boston. We don't know that every inline skater in Boston was surveyed. Now, I want to show you some labeling that goes on in this chart, so you might label these so you can refer back to them. Come over here and let's talk about row headings. My rows go this way. My columns, of course, are going to go that way. So my row headings and row variables are here. Right here, this skill level, that's called your row variable. Remember the definition of variable? Something that could be measured, counted, or classified. I am classifying your skill level as beginner, average, or advanced. These right here are called row headings. they had the row talking about beginners, average inline skaters, and advanced inline skaters. So row variable, something that could be measured, counted, or classified. And then the row headings are our breakdowns of that. Now, let's come over to the column heading and the column variable. In this case, the column variable is right there. Something, once again, that can be counted, classified. So the column headings would be the no gear, the one piece, the 2 to 4 pieces, and the total. So just a little terminology for you there. So now, if you would, let's come back to B. It says what variables are presented. I kind of already labeled them in here. The variable presented, one of them is row variable. Is skill level. The other is the amount of protective gear. Those are variables. Once again, I can classify each of those. Now, sometimes to answer questions, you got to go get information out of the chart and work with it. In this case, it says what percent of skaters wore no gear. So I need to go get the number of skaters that wore no gear, which looks like 874 of them, and divide it by the total number that we had in our survey, which is 2,145. Now, guys, once again, I knew I needed a percent, so our answer should be a percent. If we have to round it, we need the approximate symbol. And then if you run that through your calculator, you should get approximately 40.75%. We traditionally round to the nearest hundredth, the nearest 2 decimals. Sometimes we'll tell you different, but that's kind of a standard. So there's A, B, and C. Here's D, that same chart again. It says what percent, so once again I need a percent, of beginners wore no gear. So I need to go, once again, I need to go get the percent of beginners. So I need the number of beginners that wore no gear. That looked like the 188 of them. And I need to divide that by, see if you can decide if we're going to divide that by 2,145 or 709. And if you look, how many total beginners are we talking about? 709 in this case. So if you run that through your calculator, looks like you're going to get about 26.52%. Now, as soon as it says what percent of beginners, you are only allowed to think about that row right there. Here goes part E. How many skaters said they were advanced? How many skaters said they were advanced? Well, 372 advanced skaters wore no gear. 242 advanced skaters wore one piece. 140 advanced skaters wore 2 to 4. There's my total. Now, guys, notice that it did not say percent. So my answer in this case is the 754 skaters. And then part F, how many advanced skaters, so we're only talking about the advanced skaters, wore protective gear. So you only get to use this row right here. These guys did not wear any protective gear, so 242 said they wore one piece. An additional 140 said they wore 2 to 4 pieces. Looks like a total of 382 skaters. So guys, sometimes to get information from the chart, you got to do a little bit of math. Now this was really kind of an easy one. Now, you have down there it says, oh, I'm going to switch back. If you would, go back to your definitions. I'm going to slide you the last two definitions. I need to define for you what a categorical variable is and a numerical variable is. A categorical variable, their values do not correspond to specific numbers. We can just categorize them. Tall, medium, fast, slow, smart, not as smart. We can just categorize them. A numerical variable, we can tie a number to it. A variable that can be used to calculate numerical statistics, such as the mean, the median, the mode, anything like that. So I'll give you a second to write those down or take a picture or pause the video, whatever you need to do. Now that'll be our last of the videos, or of the definitions. Now, if you would, come down to the bottom of your page there. Things to look for when you're trying to draw conclusions from tables. When you're reading a table, you need to ask yourself these three questions. Number one, what variables are being presented and how? Now, those will always be your row and column headings. Kind of like on that one we just did, skill level, amount of protective gear. Now coming up, we got another one that's going to be a little tougher. The good thing is we kind of come back the next day, guys, and kind of retrace some of this, so because we know the first day is pretty tough. Number two, is the data trustworthy? 99% of our data will have a source written down at the bottom. We have to decide if that's a legitimate source or not. There's so much fake information out there that it's not always accurate. So we want to look for sources that are legit, things that have been proven over time. And I'll show you one of those on the next slide. And then what conclusions can you draw from the table? Use intersections of rows and columns. You might need to perform some calculations to answer the questions, just like we did when we got the percent. When we got the total number of advanced skaters, we had to add some together. So that's what we got. Now, if you would, come over to this next one. This one's a little more detailed. There's a lot there. What I need to do with you as we go, though, is I need to define for you our book's definition of householder. The householder isn't necessarily the person in the house that makes the most money. It's the person in the house with the highest level of education. In my house, I have more education than my wife, and unfortunately, I make more than my wife. I wish she made more than I did. I've had some friends who the wife has more education, but the husband, a contractor, makes quite a bit more money than she does. She would be the householder, even though he makes more money. Now, if you would, look at this chart real fast. There's a lot of information here. Once again, right through here would be our row headings. That would make this guy our row variable. Now, notice there's a ton of columns over here. And then you really have to watch when charts do this. It says number of households, and then we kind of forget to look. In this case, it says in parentheses thousands. So this 6,088, it really represents the 6,080 that you see with 3 additional zeros. The 9,130 really represents 9,130,000. Now, while I'm here, I'm going to mention this. Do you think these numbers are exact, or do you think they've been rounded? And in this case, the chances of every one of these coming out with 3 zeros at the end, that means they rounded all this information. So I know that these numbers here have been rounded. Since these numbers here have been rounded, when we talk about them, we got to use the word approximately. Now, peek at all of these column numbers. All of these represent percents. 21% of those with a less than 8th grade education made under $10,000. Let's go get some more information from this, in 2005. Now, it's hard to see who's telling us this information. That would be hid right down here. And in this case, it looks, I can't read that right now, so we'll bypass that part. So here goes your number one. It says, what variable is represented by the row headings, and what kind of variable is it? Well, in this case, the highest level of education completed is my row variable. Now, we now need to decide, is it categorical or numerical? So look down through here. Do you see numbers represented those, or categories? And in this case, you see categories. So, in this case, the highest level of education completed by the householder is my row variable. It's a categorical because it does not contain numbers. I cheated and went ahead and typed that up too. Here's your number two. What kinds of information are presented in the columns? So we've already used this as our row heading. So ignore this. Here's column 1, column 2, column 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So here goes. In column 1, they give us the number of households in thousands. So technically what it really gives us, guys, it gives us the approximate number of households. Technically at each level. Columns 2 through 9, if you kind of look at that information, all of these represent a percentage. So columns 2 through 9 gives the approximate percentage of households within each educational level. And then column 10 gives the median income in dollars at each educational level. So we talked about the rows, so I got those out of the way. And then these happen to be all of our columns. So I'll give you a second to jot that down, or cheat it again, pause the video, or cheat it again, take a picture. And guys, believe it or not, there's only about 6-7 more minutes to this video. So now, here's what our number 3 says. Interpret the table entry 9,130 in a sentence describing its context. This is the hassle part of the day. We're going to write a sentence on what this number represents. Now, when you do that, we need to be specific. You need to look at that number and decide if it's exact or if it's been rounded. In this case, it looks like it's definitely been rounded to the nearest thousands. So the word approximate is going to show up somewhere. The other things that we need to do to answer these questions is we need to say who's given us the information, what's it about, and when did they give it to you. Now, I'll walk you through the first one. After you see one, you'll get a feel on how to write sentences. But some things that I need to know, guys, is I need to use that this was rounded. I need to say who said it, when they said it, and what are they talking about. So notice the year up here, 2005. So here's what a form of a sentence could look like. I had to blow this up. Our source down here is the U.S. Census Bureau. The U.S. Census Bureau. So here's a form of the sentence. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, approximately 9,130,000 households in 2005 were headed by householders whose highest level of education was some high school but no diploma. Now we can shorten this up a little bit. I've had students over the years, they always want to start off with the year. So they would always say in 2005. And then they like to get the who. The U.S. Census Bureau. And then they would go answer the question. So in 2005, the U.S. Census Bureau said there were, I need that word approximately in there though. And then you really have an option here. You can add the 3 zeros on, like I did in my example, or you could list it as 9,130,000. So you could flip the information around. We just got to answer the question. The 9,130 is the intersection of some high school but no diploma and the number of households. So I need to mention that. So kind of just once again, the way I had listed it, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, so I got the who said it out of the way. Approximately, I got the rounded out of the way. 9,130,000 households in 2005 were headed, and guys, we're okay with if you don't say by householders, we could say we're headed by those whose level of education was some high school but no diploma. Here comes another sentence so you can kind of get the hang of them. Write a statement relating median income to the education of the householder. So come over here and draw some conclusion about that. And then when we write our sentence again, I need the who said it, when did they say it, what did they say, and then make sure to use the word approximately if it's needed. So here's a example. This is not the only example. It happened to be the one that I chose to type up. So here's what my sentence looked like. My conclusion that I drew is the more education you have, the higher your salary is. That was the conclusion I drew. So here's how I wrote my sentence. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, when looking at the median income of householders in 2005, the higher the level of education, the higher the median salary. Once again, guys, you could flip it around, but let's look at the important things. There's my who. There's my when. And then I didn't need the word approximately because I just drew a conclusion. I wasn't describing a number. And then I'll show you one more, then we'll have the video whipped. Interpret the entry 21.1. So interpret that entry 21.1. So make sure you find it on you. And now notice what it's about. It's the intersection of some college and a salary of between $50,000 and $74,999. So a possible sentence, we need to list the who. So somewhere we need to see U.S. Census Bureau. So we need to see that again. I need to see the word approximately. because that 21.1 has definitely been rounded. And then I need to see something tied in with educators had some college and earned between that. So guys, there's no perfect sentence here, but as long as you have the main information, what we do is we grade this. That's what we look for. The who, the when, the what. Did they use approximately? Did they answer the question? Here's how I decided to write mine. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, in 2005, approximately 21.1% of householders with some college as the highest level of education earned between $50,000 and $74,999. Like I said, guys, you could flip things around in 2005 according to the U.S. Census Bureau, but as long as you have that main information in there. So, guys, that is section 1-1. I was shooting for 28. I hit 30. If you would, that'll give you some time to hit your assignment. We'll beat this up a little bit next time also. So good luck to you guys.